Item power can be one of the more mystifying parts of Albion Online. I want to demystify that by showing you where it comes from and how it explicitly affects the game. The most obvious place that item power comes from is the tier of an item. That's the most obvious thing that you see, tiers 1 through 8. And that's the most obvious progression. You start progressing only on tiers. But as you get to tier 4 adds a layer of complexity, and that layer of complexity is the enchantment level. Now the enchantment level is actually pretty basic. It's levels 0 through 3, so 0, 1, 2, or 3. And typically you hear the enchant level talked about in terms of something like a 4.2 or 4.3, and that 0.1, 0.2, or 0.3 is the enchantment level of the item. And when it has no enchantment, it's typically called a flat, so you might hear a flat 4, row 4-2, as just a simple tier 4 item without any enchantment level. All enchantment level does is it adds to the tier. So if you take a 4.2, you add the 2 to the 4, and you get basically the same item power as a tier 6. It's not basically, it's actually exactly the same item power as a tier 6, a flat 6 that is. So the effective tiers, the actual tiers, range really between 1 and all the way up to 11, because an 8.3 is really an effective tier 11 item. Item power increases by 200 between tiers 2, 3, and 4, and then between tiers 4 and 6 it increases by 100 points. Between tiers 6 and the effective tier of 9 it increases by 80 points per tier. And between 9 and effective tier 11 it only increases by 60 points per tier. The next thing that affects the item power of an item is the quality. There's 5 layers of quality. There is normal, which is the basic, no quality added. And then there is good, which is just adding 10 points. And then there is outstanding, which only adds 20, which is 10 more. Excellent adds 50 item power total to an item. Now, the top tier quality is Masterpiece. And Masterpiece adds 100 item power to the item. There's a big leap between an excellent quality and a masterpiece quality item. Beyond that, the last thing that affects the item power of an item is your mastery with that item. Mastery points are very important in the game, and they're why you want to grind for a long time with only a few items. Because the more mastery you get in that one item, the more item power you add to it. You can see how all of these numbers add up with the item power that you're looking at by simply hovering over the item power when inspecting the item. A simple breakdown will show you exactly where the item power is coming from for any given item. So you can see exactly how your own mastery is affecting the item power of the item. Now that you know where item power comes from, how in the world does it actually affect the game? What does it really mean? The answer to that is quite simple. All of the numbers for the damages and sometimes even crowd control durations that you see on all of the abilities on an item, all of those numbers are derived from the item power. In other words, there's a ratio or a mathematical formula that includes the item power, which is where that number comes from. So to examine that more closely, I want to look at Fire Staves and I want to look at Pyroblast, which is the E ability on the standard one-handed Fire Staff. So I put together a chart that included all of the item tiers, all the way from tier 2 all the way to 8.3, and I looked at all of the numbers for the item, and they were very confusing because there's so many permutations, there's so many groupings of the item power and the enchant level. So instead of looking at all of those and creating a really confusing chart to go through, I simplified it down to the effective item powers only, and I took out all of the duplicates to create a nice, clean, simple, short chart that we can look at. And when you look at that chart with just the effective tiers, then it becomes much more clear what's going on. There's a clear relationship between the item power and the damage on Pyroblast. So I did a little bit of reverse engineering, and what I came up with is that there is a base amount of damage that Pyroblast does, in this case about 297 damage. And then on top of the base amount, about 45% of the item power gets added to Pyroblast as damage, meaning the damage scales by 45% of the item power, And I'll post a link in the description with the spreadsheet that I use to reverse engineer and calculate where all these numbers came from. And you can actually use this same approach to go look at items that you use and try to find where your numbers are calculated from. So all of the numbers for the damages that scale are found in relationship to the item power, which means the more item power you have, the more damage you do. The way it works out in this case is Pyroblast does about twice as much damage at tier 11, which is 8.3, than it does at tier 2. So item power basically determines the power of an item in the game, and it does so in concrete terms with a ratio that determines the amount of damage that abilities do based on some flat amount, some base amount, and a multiplier on the item power itself. So I hope that makes it a little bit more clear for you where item power comes from. Thanks for watching. Tribe of the Owl is recruiting. Links are in the description below to find out more.